Good morning, world. This is the Space Cowboy coming from the Interplanetary Good Vibe Zone, and welcome back to a new episode of BBS Chats. Yes, I know it has been a good while since our last one. I do apologize from that. A lot of things that happened from that last video, just from, IRL stuff and playing video games to keep up with new games and also make more videos and all that other stuff. So, we're getting back into it, especially because the Star Force collection has been announced. It is here. Well, not yet. It's coming out next year, but it shall be here soon. So we will be incorporating more Star Force discussions, which was already a plan of mine to begin with. Star Force is a spiritual successor to the Battle Network series anyway, so there wasn't any point where I wasn't going to do any Star Force stuff or tie some Star Force stuff into Battle Network discussions. But we're still going to be doing some Battle Network discussions, don't worry. It's not all doom and gloom and whatnot. Plus, I only have 4 videos of this anyway, so I don't see why I stop just doing Battle Network and just do Star Force. Wouldn't really make any sense, right? We're going to talk about something cool today. We're actually going to talk about noise changes versus soul crosses. At first, I was going to do double souls, but I feel like soul crosses are a bit more closer to the noise changes, or I guess technically it would be the other way around, at least in terms of how they function and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that'll be a nice, fun discussion to get into with these. Of course, if you do enjoy these, make sure you subscribe. Right now, the main goal of the channel is still to get 500 subs by the end of this year. 2025, we only have a couple more months left. And it seems like you guys have been doing a decent enough job for all the newcomers. Like I said, you must like what I do. So please continue to support me. And I do appreciate you guys that do continue to watch my stuff and all of that. I really do appreciate that. But yeah, without all that, all that being said, let's go ahead and just get into the discussion. So first, what are noise changes? Well, noise changes are, of course, the power-up that the Mega Man in Star Force gets. For differentiating, I'll just say Mega Man SF versus EXE, just to kind of, differentiate, because if I just say Mega Man for both of them, it's going to get confusing. Noise change will occur when a noise control program is equipped and with it on, instead of being corrupted by noise, because that's one of the main things about Star Force. I almost tripped myself and said Battle Network 3. With Star Force 3, you can get corrupted by noise. That's like one of the main things in that game, and it can either cause some sort of, issue or problem. But with noise change, you have to have a certain program installed, and, Mega Man SF will resonate with the noise. So this caused more of the same resonant noise from Meteor G, from, I believe it's also Star Force 3. It essentially, it makes Mega Man stronger. He draws in more noise. You get the picture with that. The noise changes are based on the Ephemians that Mega Man SF have fought in the past and, of course, present. This is due to Meteor G absorbing noise data of the Ephemians from outer space, which Omegasys happens to resonate with due to them being of similar frequency. And then I believe he has 3 ultimate transformations from the noise forms that are based on specific assorted EM beings. The noise changes largely depend on the noise gauge and undergo some changes as the noise gauge reaches different levels, after which they finish a battle with giant viruses. They stand a chance to get a different noise change. If it is a new noise change that they have not used before, they will be able to see some of the new noise abilities before confirming if they wish to switch to new noise change. So from what I can gather, I think the noise changes are only accessible to 1 per use, very similar to how the old style changes worked. Or maybe you do just get access to different noise changes. You can access them through your abilities. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Something that I do find interesting about the noise changes in these games is that they kind of work on varying levels. So starting off, from what I've read, you start off at 0% and you build up, slowly as a battle goes on. And the noise does build up relatively quickly. It's not like it's super slow or it takes, a certain amount of turns to get to a certain, portion, especially if you're fighting your battles well enough. And from what I can gather, you actually start off with a partial transformation once you get up to a certain point. From what I'm looking at this picture here, it's about like 35%. And then the actual full transformation doesn't come in until you reach 100%. And even after you reach 100%, you can still build up more noise to keep up your transformation longer because the gauge does decrease over time. So from what I'm reading right here, between 0 to 50% noise, the noise change starts at its noise form or the form out stage, where the other player has access, or not, excuse me, not the other player, but you, the player yourself, have access to some of the innate abilities. Once the gauge exceeds 50%, the equipped noise change will enter vibrant noise form, or color out in the Japanese, where the player has access to all of its abilities, including its element, charge shot, and its NFB, which I would only assume is like the actual unique ability of each of the noise transformations. Each noise change has a weakness to a certain type of attack, of course, you know, very similar to the elemental weaknesses of the Devil Souls / Soul Crosses, all that stuff. And of course, when you're hit by your weakness, you will revert to the form out stage at 0%, pretty much getting reverted back to your base form. The gauge will also decrease steadily down to 50%, like I stated before, but if the player finishes a battle over 100% noise, Mega Man SF starts his next battle at 50% noise in the vibrant noise form of his selected noise change. I actually really do like this about this series. It's really cool. It brings a big risk and reward system when it comes to this, unlike the Battle Network games where you can pretty much just bulldoze your way through the enemies. Like, yes, you do have elemental weaknesses, but by the time we got to Battle Networks 4 and 5, you know, with the Double Souls and even Battle Network 6, especially with how the crosses work, you're not necessarily tied down to just one form, and you're pretty much at less of a risk to, you know, get mortally wounded and all that kind of stuff. Towards though in, I don't know why I said mortally wounded. You guys get what I mean. You sustain enough damage to the point where you get reverted back to your original form where you just take a mass amount of damage. It's pretty easily avoidable in the Battle Network games, but in this game, with the Star Force games, specifically Star Force 3, of course, you have the risk of losing all of that power if you're not careful enough in a fight. But if you're, you know, playing well and you're, you know, doing your best to like play around the enemies, you can pretty much relatively maintain your transformation, and you can even go into the full power form with, you know, less meter, but still getting in with like your strongest, you know, form at the start of a next battle if you play well enough. It's a really cool concept of the starting off weak at the start of battle, but then, you know, getting to your full potential at the full power level with the full transformation at 100% and doing your best to maintain that gauge output. So yeah, pretty much like a really cool pro and con of, you know, the noise transformations, where you start off weak, but you gradually grow stronger as the battle goes along, and you are literally growing into your abilities, but you are at greater risk of, you know, losing out on that greater power if you sustain a significant amount of damage, or if you are not careful enough with the enemies that you're fighting. In contrast with the, you know, Double Souls, and especially with the Soul Crosses, which Soul Crosses specifically I won't pay attention to. Soul Crosses, you can pretty much just swap out of these forms whenever you want. There is no turn limit or turn cost for how long you can stay in these forms. Big drawback though is, like I said, you do take more damage depending on, you know, which element you're getting attacked by and the increased damage from those. It seems, as far as, you know, with the crosses compared to the noise change, I would say the Soul Crosses do have an edge over that. However, it does get a bit finicky when you start incorporating the Beast Outs, because the Beast Out is pretty similar to the noise changes and also kind of incorporates more of the OG Double Soul aspect, where it has a turn limit. If you also merge the Beast Out transformations with one of the crosses, if you take a specific attack from like your weakness, then you're not going to be able to access your Beast Outs or your Soul Crosses. I think you're just completely locked out of them until you either die or you somehow still manage to win that battle. So that is another thing that you can count as a weakness for the crosses, you know, in comparison with the noise changes. And something else that the noise changes also do to kind of compete with the combination of the Beast Outs and the crosses is that there are multi-noise transformations in the Star Force 3 game. So you can actually merge two different noise changes to gain an even greater power, although it's not as crazy as I might have originally thought it was. So from what I understand, you pretty much gain, you know, whatever your second noise transformation would have been, and you can merge that with the first noise transformation that you have, and you do gain both of the abilities and some of the benefits of both of the noise changes together, although the difference is that you only have access to the charge shot of the latter noise change that you acquire. So like the charge shot and the main like special ability of that latter noise change you can only have access to, but everything else for the most part you do get like the abilities, like the main benefits and all that stuff from both of the noise changes, which I do think is pretty cool. Now from a visual standpoint, I will say it's not the most creative, and to be fair, I can understand why they couldn't like design all of these, because there is like the base initial design for like each of the noise changes themselves, and then for all of the multi-noise combinations, it's pretty much just the base like design of the regular the first noise change, and then a bunch of color palette swaps to kind of indicate, oh, like this is like what's combined with which one, which I mean is still pretty cool. In that way, I guess it also kind of harkens back to the style change system, where you pretty much had like the main style changes and you can have an element tied to each one, so it's like each one can have its own different color, but the unique design is still the unique design. And in that sense, it's probably a bit more better than the Beast Out Soul Cross combination, because as far as what I understand, there doesn't seem to be too much of a drawback from the multi-noise combinations, but there is still some risk. Of course, getting hit by the multi-noises' new weaknesses will revert the player to his base noise form stage of the initial noise at 0%. So you still do stay in your initial noise, you just lose out on that double noise change. But again, I still think that's more of a cost benefit rather than having Beast Out with the Soul Cross merge, and then if you get hit by a weakness or you get hit by a certain special attack, you just lose out on transforming altogether. I will say, from a visual standpoint, comparing both the noises and the crosses, I still think the crosses edge out the noise forms just a little bit. I do think that the noise forms are pretty cool from a visual standpoint, but they more so just look like an armor change. There's not really much of a drastic change from the Soul Crosses. I do think the Soul Crosses have a bit more of a uniqueness, despite the fact that I think the Soul Crosses are an even more watered down version of the Double Souls themselves. And of course, to round it up all out though, we do have the finalization. When your meter's at over 200% for the noise gauge, that is when you will be able to access your ultimate transformations with Black Ace and Red Joker, which I think is pretty damn cool. And you get giga buffed, you're really strong, you gain access to a really powerful ability. I think you can only access it by countering. I don't know if they changed that if in Star Force 3, because I know that was the thing with the previous games. You can only access like your big sort of like special moves when you counter the enemies that you fight. But you do get access to like several really strong battle cards. It's not just the main special moves of the two final transformations, but you also just get access to other more powerful cards that you probably don't have access to use, which could also incorporate to which form you're using and how that might stack with some of the other forms in the game. But Black Ace and Red Joker themselves do look pretty good. It's probably like two of the best looking like Mega Man transformations in some of the like pretty much any of the Mega Man games. At least I think so. You might think they look a little too designed, and at first they kind of do, but I think they do a pretty good job of making Mega Man SF look more like a awesome actual like final powerful transformation. Like they're really, really cool. And I guess comparing these with like Soul Cross and Base Cross from Battle Network with Mega Man EXE, it's hard because I have a lot of bias with Base Cross. Like it's my favorite form of Mega Man EXE. Like it looks so good, and Soul Cross also looks very very cool as well. So I don't know, maybe if I had to compare those two with these two, I mean I'd still probably say Base Cross over both of these. But I do think Red Joker would probably be second. I thought I always liked Black Ace a little more than Red Joker when I initially saw these like years ago, but looking at these now, there's something about Red Joker that I do like just a little bit more over Black Ace, but I still think Black Ace looks pretty damn sick. I'm not gonna lie. I do think like overall, it feels like from a mechanical standpoint that the noise change transformations do seem a bit more balanced. Maybe you could say the soul crosses are better just because, you know, there's probably less risk with the soul crosses than the noise change transformations themselves. But maybe in a long form battle, these noise transformations are overall better than the soul crosses. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Like I said, this is all kind of new territory for me when it comes to a lot of the Star Force stuff. So I'm going to be learning a lot about, you know, a lot of these things as far as like the mechanics and even like, you know, some lore bits. Like there are some things that I am aware of. It's not like I'm completely oblivious to Star Force, but seeing as how I have not played these games, there are some things about this series that I'm not like, you know, completely used to just yet, like, you know, with Battle Network, which I mean, to be fair, you know, it only makes sense. But yeah, please, like I said, let me know how you guys feel. You know, please, if you guys play Star Force and you want to correct me about anything here, please feel free to do so. Like, I am not, you know, trying to say I'm like 100% knowledgeable. Like, I would love to be taught, you know, or you know, about like, you know, certain things, and you know, I don't want my misinformation to be wrong or anything that, you know, like that, you know, especially because this is a bit more casual, on the casual side compared to some of the other stuff that I've probably talked about. But I would very much appreciate it. And of course, we will be back with more BBS chats. Like as I will make sure that I am working on more of those. I'll get a couple more of those recorded and whatnot. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video, comment, you know, make sure you hit the notification bell so that you never miss any updates or uploads and live streams on the channel. Make sure you are interacting with me more on the community/post section of the channel. You can also follow me on Blue Sky if you want to keep up with me for updates and, you know, all the other good stuff. With all that being said, this is the Space Cowboy, and I hope you guys have a good night.